That is undoubtedly one of my favorite Tupac songs. I remember when I first heard those lyrics for the first time, I was like just blown away by his honesty and his passion, the pain, the truth. It like hit me. But the thing that really stuck out to me, I felt like this was the first time I ever heard prayer on a rap record. The entire song is one long prayer to God. Think about it. Now that I'm struggling in this business by any means, labeling me greedy, getting green, but seldom seen, and fuck the world cause I'm cursed. I'm having visions of leaving here in a hearse. God, can you feel me? Take me away from all the pressure and all the pain. Show me some happiness again. I'm going blind. I spend my time in the cell and living well. I know my destiny is hell. Where did I fail? My life is in denial. And when I die, baptized in eternal fire, shed so many tears. Lord, I suffered through many years and shed so many tears. I didn't know at the time, but this song had an indelible effect on how I see the relationship of prayer to God. After all, what is prayer but nothing more than a conversation between the subject and his or her creator? I started to search for the authenticity in faith. Weirdly enough, this song impacted my love of jazz, and in particular singling out one of my favorite jazz albums of all time, which was released 30 years prior to this Tupac record. Now, if you pay close attention to my podcast art, you can catch it. The album I'm referencing is, of course, John Coltrane's The Love Supreme. Now, the beauty of that album, taking just a quick detour here, is that Coltrane was prior to that addicted badly to opium and heroin. In order to beat this demon addiction, it was recommended that he get on promethazine in order to quit the drug. Now, Coltrane refused because in his mind, he didn't want to use a drug in order to get off a drug. So he decided to quit cold turkey. Now, here's where the genius manifests. During this episode of his life, Coltrane attributes his kicking off the drug to God. In fact, it was God who was speaking to him through melody and song, which had him write the initial sheet music for these incredible jazz records. His wellness and musical inspiration came directly from God. So what does it have to do with Tupac? Well, I'm glad you asked. See, if you listen to the album, The Love Supreme, it's of course a jazz album with no lyrics. But if you close your eyes and open your ears, you can almost hear the lyrics come through the drums, the saxophone, the trumpets, and the bass. John Coltrane is literally praying throughout the entire album, with tracks called Acknowledgement, Resolution, Pursuance, and Psalms. It's obviously littered with religious themes, but as Coltrane put it, these songs were essentially a love letter to the Creator. In fact, A Love Supreme marked the only time that Coltrane wrote album notes for an entire album, and he presented it in a poem. This was a spiritual manifesto, his most personal statement. It was clearly very important to him. He consciously designed it to be interfaith. And although the album actually is only 33 minutes long, he avoided the mention of Jesus or any religious figures on the record, just only referencing God. He wanted the record to be a modern identity, Black religious empowerment, not confined to the orthodoxy of the Christian faith. Now, I personally think that it ending in 33 minutes was actually significant. But despite all that, despite fact of both Coltrane and Tupac saw their independent musical expressions as modern prayers to God, speaks to a larger issue of how does Christianity, and in particular the Black church, continues to modernize itself in presentation on how people choose to interact with God and the world around them. Listen, there's no secret that the Black church is a byproduct of a wicked slavery institution. It's because of this legacy that oftentimes the church is saddled with the ideal of legacy and format, and therefore ostracizing those among us who seek to have an authentic relationship with God that doesn't revolve around the brick and mortar orthodoxy of Black faith. So how does the church continue to thrive and survive when numbers show that Black millennials and Generation Z members have moved away in mass and large numbers away from the church, with many unintentionally getting their Coltrane on and seeking another way of worship that's away from the traditional avenues of faith and worship, and opting instead to operate with this quote-unquote spirituality that regular Christian orthodoxy doesn't have. It's not uncommon to hear people say, I'm more spiritual than religious, especially in this current environment, where Black people are becoming more super sensitive to the progeny of social hierarchy of white supremacy. Can a church that was rooted in the primary objectivity of America's greatest sin evolve enough to keep its base of black congregants, or are they destined to go the way to dodo, a trajectory of irrelevance and non-cultural importance? Does a church recognize when someone is screaming about societal injustices, poverty, shame, destruction, all these things that are essentially prayers of the people? If a riot is a language of the unheard, well, then songs and or mantras like "so many tears" are essentially the primal blood curdling of the overlooked. Both examples and both show examples or offer exchanges of black pain demonstration. However, it's up to the church to move where the riots and or the screaming is. Or, if I may invoke an interfaith non-Christian reference, shout out to John Coltrane, the mountain did not move from Muhammad, so Muhammad went to the mountain. Welcome to Uncultured Bias podcast. My name is Camara Williams. I am your host. On our show, we say that culture is a matter of perspective and opinion. After all, culture is another way to say discovered. We are uncultured, we are biased, and we are black. Now, if you're tuning in for the first time, welcome to our show. You know what? We appreciate it. We appreciate you guys checking us out. If you are not a first-time listener and you're just returning, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Yo, if you're a first-time listener or welcome, you're just a returning listener and current. Always supporting the show. We only ask that you guys continue to share the podcast because we say that sharing is caring on this show. So share it with your friends, family, colleagues, even people you hate. I don't care. Let's share the podcast. If you're going to share it, you can do it on, I guess, text message or social media, or even if you want to do email, I guess. Just go ahead and share that. Let everybody know what we're doing. If you're listening on an Apple device, we ask that you give us a review and a 5-star review and a message saying how much you love the show, if you're so inclined. There's a way for Apple to figure out if people are really engaging the show other than listening. So we just ask that people continue to do that. That would really help as well. All right, so we're going to give a shout out to our sponsors this week. New sponsor is Coleman Law. So you can reach them at www.coleman.law. You can reach them at 850-597-2990. By the time you hear this podcast, tax season is already over, but you still may need to actually, file an extension or do whatever or handle your tax issues. And Coleman Law is a tax law firm that can help you along the way. So please contact Coleman Law if you're so inclined. Also, if you're inclined to look for a real estate options, please contact Keystone Global Real Estate. You can reach that at KeystoneGlobalRealEstate.com. Or at 407-680-8510. That's 407-680-8510 if you're in the market for real estate, both residential or commercial. And of course, if you're in the market for wills, estate planning, guardianships, trusts, and all that fun stuff, contact my firm at Smith Williams Trial Group at 888-798-4529 or 888-SWTG-LAW. Of course, you can reach us at swtglaw.com or direct me to cwilliams@swtglaw.com or info@swtglaw.com. All right, brilliant. We're actually going to get right into this podcast, and I want to bring on our first-time guest, Marcus, or is it Bishop, or how do you want me to say it?
You can say Marcus.
Marcus McCoy, and you are a gentleman of faith.
Yes.
You are a minister, or what's your official designation? I know you just wanted to call me Marcus.
So Pastor
Marcus McCoy.
Yes.
And what church are you from?
Senior pastor of the Greater Refuge Memorial Church in downtown Orlando, 596 West Church Street in downtown, in the confines of Paramore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of the black community.
Right in the middle.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
How long you been a pastor?
So pastoring now 4 years.
Wow.
This year will make the 4th year.
So you're a senior.
So
literally a senior. You said senior, but you literally are senior year.
This is my senior year. Yeah. Took over from my father, who retired at the age of 55.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. And the church voted me in as senior pastor.
Wow. Okay. So it's literally in the blood.
It's in the blood. Yeah. The church that we're at now, my grandfather actually pastored, and my father pastored, and now I'm a pastor.
So McCoy has been at the helm of this church for how many years now?
We would say 40 years.
Wow.
40 plus years.
40 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Since the 1980s? 81.
Something like
82,
that.
yeah, 82. Yeah, that's incredible. And but also being pastor, but how long is your family been associated with the church?
Yes, so I'm fifth generation apostolic, if you would, or Pentecostal.
Okay.
So it dates back to my great grandma Mary.
Wow.
Who's been a part of what we call the Church of Our Lord Jesus Christ. That's the organization that we're a part of.
And all at Central Florida?
No. So that's international.
Right.
The church is based out of New York.
Okay.
Headquartered in New York, but we have churches domestically and internationally.
Okay. Wonderful. So I always like to ask, especially first-time guests, when you first time listening to this podcast or, being a part of it, what did you take from the opening statement that I was making, and did you pull anything? This is my time to give you, because I took up a lot of air in the beginning. So some things that you kind of received from that, or maybe even like a challenge or whatnot, but I just want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, was really intrigued by the piece where you talked about Coltrane.
Yeah.
And y'all have to excuse me.
No.
Coltrane, and how the album didn't have any lyrics to it.
Yeah.
But if you listened, you could hear lyrics being ministered. And that just took me to David, who was a skilled musician. He was not only the king of Israel, but was a skilled musician, and ministered to Saul, who was the king.
Yeah.
And Saul, when he was troubled in his spirit, he called on David to play.
Yeah.
And not to sing, but to play.
Yeah.
And those troubling issues were then removed because of the skillfulness and the things that were being unsaid.
Yeah.
So I really identified with that.
And, to tie it all in, the Psalms, which were written by David.
Correct.
And on the album, it's called Psalms.
Really?
Yeah, there's a track called the Psalms.
I'm going to have to go listen to this.
Yes, and I will tell you, like I said, it's literally a long form prayer.
Wow.
It's probably like an hour long record. I don't know, but it's my favorite record. I know I did a whole opening with John Coltrane, but I love talking about the Love Supreme. I remember I was introduced to it in my 20s.
Okay.
And in college, and I was listening to the record, and a friend gave me the album because obviously it predates me, and I was like, "Yeah, it's cool." And he was like, "Did you listen to it?" I was like, "No." He said, "Okay, yeah, of course I listened to it." He's like, "No, you didn't listen to it." I said, "How do you know?" He said, "Because you didn't tell me any lyrics." I said, "There's no lyrics, Jacob, throughout the entire album." He said, "You didn't listen to it." And so he's like, "Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go home, take the album again, and close your eyes, lay down, and listen and see if you can hear words coming out of the songs. And then you can come back and have a conversation about the album, about John Coltrane, about the love supreme, And of course he does say, he mentions the love supreme like throughout the album, but essentially it's just there's no lyrics. But they are, though.
They are.
And it's where, and this is the thing, the lyrics are because where God is present within those records. You can hear both the conversation between Coltrane and God because he's so happy that God delivered him. This is a exclamation record. These are exclamation records on wax. He's happy. He's celebrating. He's literally telling God, "Thank you."
Wow.
But you can't hear. And that's why it's called the Love Supreme, because it was supreme love that brought him out of the despair that he was in.
Wow. That takes me to the scripture that said he inhabits the praises of its people. So when you get into that place, God will come and sit like directly right where you are.
Right.
And you can minister.
Right.
He can minister to you and you to him.
Right. And so I'm glad you said that, because it shows that, God doesn't have to be in the specific space of how we tend to limit him. He's like, I would meet you where you are. I will come and communicate to you in a space that is comfortable and that, you can understand me.
Yeah.
And so it's unfortunate that it took him to get over drugs, but sometimes it's in our hardships where we meet, God, and we actually have the authentic conversations with him about our life, our despair, and what we're doing and why we're here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The text teaches us that tribulation worketh patience, and patience experience, and experience gives us hope.
Right.
So without those tribulations, and it even talks about glory in your tribulations, because at the end of it, you're going to be made better. You're going to be refined. You're going to see yourself and God in a totally different light.
So it's almost like you have to go through these
You
things.
have to go through. You have to go through. And so many people feel like once you name the name of Christ or you decide to follow Christ that, you're not going to have tribulations.
Right.
And some of the most heinous things were done to people of faith, and they had to go through. I mean, when you talk about John the Baptist, people were beheaded, were put in jail.
Right.
Talk about things that Tupac, Martin Luther King, and Jesus had in common. They're all returning citizens.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to go through things.
Yeah. This is where I want to take this conversation, because I think about, Black people, and my podcast is centered on Black culture. Sometimes I wonder, last year we had this podcast called Modern Faith, Faith in the Modern Space. And Pastor David Jock was on there, and it was
good guy.
Yeah, well received. And we talked about how slavery, how can there be a God who allowed such atrocities to happen to his people, and why? But then it's like when you're thinking something, and I still don't think God wanted slavery, right? This was a human construct, right? But it's tribulations that we have gone through as a people, that we continue to go through, and we've thrived, and it's shown our strength. Now we didn't need to go through slavery and all the atrocities attributed to it and white supremacy in order to show our strength and our beauty, because we had that on the continent already, Mother Africa. But when you see or when you hear scripture like that, it puts me in a framework. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I don't think it was God's design nor desire for us to have to go through some of the things that we've gone through. Even when you look at the children of Israel, it's called, those were his children. And when he was taking them from Egyptian bondage to what was called the Promised Land, that journey should have only taken 11 days from Egypt to where he ended up placing them. Right. But because of their unwillingness to honor him, for whatever reason, it took 40 years. Yeah. So sometimes God has to take you the long way for you to recognize who he is in your life. And I know many people who appreciate that, what should have took an 11 day took 40 years, but I see myself and God totally different than I would have if I would have never went through anything.
So let's go ahead and challenge this though, right?
Okay.
Because then there are those who may say, and I said this last year, who may say can a God exist in a space where he openly allows such pain and torture and degradation happen to a group of people? Like how can God exist in that space? Where is God?
Yeah. I think he can't exist when you take off the confines of what you see God to be. He teaches us that his ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. And oftentimes when we view God, we try to view God in our finite way of thinking. Okay. And so it's important that if you're going to believe that there is a God, you have to believe that he is a God that wants good for you. Though you may have to go through struggles, trials, tribulations, though there are things that are not understood in the world, you still have to think that he's still for you, and that whatever you're going through, it's for a purpose, it's for a reason. And at the end, you may not understand it. This is the faith that we come from. You may not understand it clearly here, but there will come a time where it will be revealed that the suffering that we all went through, it was for a greater purpose.
But how can God love you? Because we talk about we are his people, we are his sheep.
Absolutely.
How can God love you, or let's say you have a child. Do you have any children?
I have 2.
Okay, so I have 2 children.
Okay.
And in having those children, my children, and I'm assuming the same thing with you, I can never imagine putting harm in their head so they can learn a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 daughters. I was joking with friends of mine. They have boys, and I said to them, they were like, "Yeah, I had to snatch up my son, and kind of give him a little pop to kind of get him together."
Harm.
Yeah, huh?
A little harm.
A little harm, right? Little love tap, right? To get him together because he just was being a knucklehead. And I said, that's fascinating. I said, I've never laid a hand on my daughters. Never laid a hand on them. I said, namely because I don't want my daughters to be comfortable with the concept of a man putting hands on them. Mm-hmm. And so they never have, and I never will, put my hands on them. Obviously, I've never put hands on their mother either. So I don't even want them to see violence. Mm-hmm. There's no violence in this home. Now, I may raise my voice, but even when I raise my voice, I don't want to yell at them because I don't want them to think it's okay for a man to, raise his voice to a woman. Mm-hmm. He can be excited. He can give levels of, of discomfort of how he feels about the situation, but he should never raise his voice to you.
Absolutely.
To communicate to you. So I say all that to say, that's my love to my children because I don't want harm coming on them. And I'm assuming you don't want harm to ever come on your children. So why would God want harm to come onto his children?
Yeah, I don't think it's wanting harm. I think you have to look at it through a different lens. I think it's looking at sometimes we, because of whatever let me just say this to listeners, I don't presume to know everything.
No. You're not omnipresent, right?
But these are my thoughts. This is what I feel, my experiences with God, right. That going through situations is not like God wanting harm for you. Mm-hmm. As a parent, as a new parent of 2 young children, often rely on the advisement of parents who have raised children. Yeah. And some parents will tell you that sometimes they've had to let go of their children in order for them to get to a place of responsibility. Right. And so it was hurtful for them to let the child go and to fall. Yeah. It was hurtful for them to see the child struggle. Yeah. But at the end, they knew that the child needed this struggle, the child needed this uncomfortability to get to a place that it understood that it has to be held accountable. Yeah. And so I see the same thing with God. A lot of things we say God does, it's more so I would like to say he allows. And he allows it for a purpose.
But what is the purpose? What can be the purpose of
and that's the faith.
Mutilization and, what can be the purpose of indoctrination? What can be the purpose? Why would something want to create such an environment of pain? Yeah. And because he's allowing it. And I'm not talking about saying I don't believe in God. But I'm talking about for those who say that God doesn't exist. Because God existed, there wouldn't be pain in the world. Mm-hmm.
Well, right? Who says that? Where do we get that construct that there won't be pain in the world because God exists?
I don't.
So you attribute something to a God that you don't even have a relationship with, because God never says in His Word, He never teaches us that you won't go through pain. Matter of fact, he says all things work together
for those who love the Lord.
For those who love the Lord. And so we take that all, the good, the bad, the things we understand and the things that we don't understand. And that is the faith that one has to have. Right. That I may not understand why he's taking me this way. I may not understand why there is such degradation and, issues going on in the world. I don't understand why, parents, children are taken away from their parents, and you see all the just atrocity in the world. I don't understand it at all. Yeah. But I know and I feel that there's a greater purpose for this. Right. Because if you don't, then you allow yourself to become this, you become overwhelmed by what you see. Yeah. And that's what faith does. Faith helps you balance what's going on in the world. Because if you don't, for me, if I didn't have faith and an understanding that what I'm going through is for a greater purpose, I would collapse. Because there is so much that the world, individuals, we have to face and go through.
Yeah, no doubt. So, I want to continue to push the conversation forward and let's talk about the modern church. I mentioned in my opening how Generation Z and millennials are moving away from church. Do you see that as well? Or have you seen the numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
So there was a study done by the Pew Research, Dr. Bradley, who did a new study for African Americans in the Black church. It was a 2021 study, just came out 2022. And they did say that there is a falling away of millennials from the traditional, and I'm doing quotes, y'all can't see it. Yes. Traditional, quote unquote, Black church. So yes, there's data to substantiate that.
What are your thoughts on that, on why?
It's diverse. The Black church is not monolithic.
Right.
And so neither is the subject. So
can I get an opinion? And then you tell me I'm right and wrong. You'd be like, and you can be just like my wife, like, you don't know what you're talking about. So, or as people might listen to this podcast, like, Camara doesn't know what he's talking about. But I think there's two things. Number one, the church has failed to adjust to the modern scope of how people see the world, right? And we can delve into that in a moment. And also, it's that people don't see themselves in the church anymore. Mm-hmm. And so why would I be a part of something that I don't see myself in? Or I don't see the representation that I'm looking for. I don't see like my ideals being shown through this particular periscope of faith.
Yeah. I would agree that two of those are reasons. But I would add this one for me as the prevailing. It's because the church has forgotten its mission,
which is
to minister to the lost. It's almost like the church nowadays wants to only minister to people who are fixed, and that we don't want to really get down into the weeds of dealing with people who are dealing with a multiplicity of issues.
It's become the gym for the weightlifters. And
a social club, if you would, instead of a hospital. And so when you really think of a church, for me, a church is a place where the wounded comes. Our church is called Greater Refuge. Our tagline is Refuge, your place of safety. And so we're downtown, and so I often have to remind my congregants who are older that you can't be looking at people sideways when they come through this door and they have a smell. We're in the middle of Paramore, downtown Orlando. Homelessness, mental illness, abandonment, all of that. And people, when they see the doors of the church open, they're expecting to receive people who are going to receive them. And then if you are, not in a place for that, this is not the place for you to be.
Fascinating thing is that Jesus probably smelled.
Maybe,
because
I hope he didn't, but maybe he did.
No, but and I'm not saying that as to be derogatory.
I understand.
But I say that because he lived among the people. He wasn't someone who, from what we know in teachings, he wasn't someone who lived, in a singular home. He traveled,
correct,
and he sometimes slept on floors. And he walked amongst the people. He was a man. He was clearly not a man of wealth as far as, earthly wealth.
Absolutely.
But a man of somebody who maybe lived off the kindness of his followers.
Brother Williams, you've been reading your Bible, huh?
I mean, I have. I'm gonna admit, I used to. I'm not as fervent as I used to be.
Sounds like you know something about Jesus.
Well, I mean, I did have some foundations.
Very good, very good. You're right.
Yeah. And so I think to myself that had Jesus walked into Greater Refuge, some may not recognize him because he didn't come through the aesthetic that we're, expecting, and they be like, oh, he got an odor, a BO. He got a godly BO, right? Right, because
and we do have hygiene bags for those individuals
right,
who need.
right. Imagine giving Jesus a hygiene bag. He'd be like, sir.
Oh God, that's funny.
But in realness, I hear people who say, or you read it and you hear it, and you speak to people. So you know what? I left the church because I didn't like the way they treated me.
Mm-hmm.
I stopped going to church because X, Y, and Z. And I have my opinions on it, but I want to hear your viewpoint on that. How do you feel when you hear people, or have you heard people say that?
Yes, hear it, and I sympathize with those individuals because there is something called church hurt.
Yeah.
And that's real. Mm-hmm. And I want anyone out there who is listening, you may experience church hurt. I want to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And I want to, say that I'm sorry you had to go through that. You had to experience church hurt on whatever level it was.
Yeah.
But Jesus didn't do it, right? So,
yeah.
So, don't turn your back on him just because you had to go through an unfriendly experience with people who call themselves his disciples.
Right.
I often try to remind people, you go through hurt on your job, but you get up every day.
Right.
And go through you go through hypocrites in your own house, but that don't stop you from opening up your door.
That don't stop you from going home.
And going home.
Right.
So if we could just with that same
keep that energy.
Keep that same energy.
Yeah.
I think that you'll get through it.
Yeah.
Others, I've been hurt by church. Again, 5th generation.
Yeah.
Born and raised in the church, literally almost born and raised. I was 14 days old, born.
And they put you on the pew and be like,
my first convention. 14 days old. I was at my first convention. People still talking about my mom to this day about had the baby out there with.
Yeah.
But born and raised.
Black people would talk about new baby like, oh, that baby out there. He's supposed to be in the house for 8 weeks.
But I was at church, so I've seen it. I won't say it all, but I've seen it. I've heard it. I've felt it.
Yeah.
I've experienced it. But like you said, keep that same energy.
Yeah. My thoughts and literally going along the same lines is that, okay, you've had a broken heart before. Does that mean you never want to fall in love?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it sucks. It hurts. Going through a broken heart can change you. It can make you bitter.
Yeah.
Opening yourself up, and then through opening yourself up, you become vulnerable. And, you might sort of sometimes question, like, why did I allow myself to be so vulnerable to this? Mm-hmm. Because at the time, there was something unique in that because you felt it. You felt love. And when you experience love, it's a very addictive toxin to continue with. But sometimes that love can be poisonous because it's a toxin. Mm-hmm. And that poison, that toxicity, can harm the body. And so some people are like, I had love and it hurts and I had to walk away. But the thing about love is, if you've really, really had it, you want to go back towards it, And so church should be the same thing.
Yeah.
Or faith should be the same thing, because faith, when you've really had faith, if you've really experienced it, you've touched it, you've tasted it, you've been engulfed in it, it's been cloaked around you through the chilling moments of your life, and the bitter cold is whipping on your shoulders, but it was faith who put its blankets around you and protect you from the chilliness of the world. When you've had that, nobody wants to go back in the element without a jacket on. You
better paint this picture. Did y'all see that? The chilliness, the cold. You better paint this picture.
Listen. You can use that on Sunday.
Yeah,
I ain't going to charge it to the game, so you can use that on Sunday.
Yeah, that's true though.
Yeah. So I understand it, but I also want to challenge people to say, like, you have to look at it through a bigger lens and not through your own hurt, but look at through the bigger lens framework of your life or the world, because we often want to attribute this particular attitude to that particular sector of your experience, but then we don't want to transfer it to something else. It's like people who say LeBron James shouldn't be, he should stick to sports, right? He shouldn't be, while he's doing sports, playing basketball, he shouldn't be commenting on social issues with the irony that they're like at work, making a social media post about social issues. Maybe you should stick to accounting. Right? But we don't keep that same energy.
We don't keep that same
because
energy.
we often we forget, we bifurcate our own experiences when it doesn't align with our biases.
Correct.
And that's a poisonous thing. So speaking of, keeping it forward, keeping it pushing, when you talk about just the modernization of the Black church, and it's in my opinion that, there was a lost opportunity in the last 20, 30 years of really getting into Black liberation theory. Are you familiar with that theory?
Yes.
Okay. You want to speak on that?
Yeah. I agree. There were missed opportunities.
Yeah.
Because Black people during that time were just getting, in my opinion, to a certain level of wealth and influence.
Yeah.
And so once you reach a certain level of comfortability, and means, you don't want too much disrupting.
Don't rock the boat.
Don't rock the boat.
You know what I'm saying? Money's good over here.
Money's good over here.
Life is fresh.
I mean, you talk about during that time, you talk about for the church.
Yeah.
I mean, you go back to, your preachers. You had some, I think, preachers of L.A. and, just glamorizing, the lifestyle of the preacher, and even the church.
Yeah.
During that time, some of your biggest ministries were built. And I believe the church has gotten to a level of comfortability and doesn't want, in some respect, to have to fight some battles.
So, I was thinking about, see if you can follow my train of thought.
Okay.
In the 80s, drug dealers used to wear flashy clothes, right? Accoutrements of success, the big chains and the big watches and, and designer, and they'd be in the hood and they'd get the cars. And it was designed to do one thing, to attract people into the lifestyle, right? Because I don't have that, but I see he has it. How do you get that? I have to participate in that. And then, you have people who are born out of those hard environments who say or see, like, the way to attract the prosperity of God is to show the prosperity on oneself. And so they wear the accoutrements of success. They have the big cars, the nice clothing, the jets, some even, saying I have to get 20
Not
something.
me.
I know. Not saying I know because I said, but I'm saying like, but it's the idea that, if you can show that worshiping God can bring you these things, then what's the problem? What is the issue? That's what you hear. Like, what is the issue of showing God's favor? And so prosperity gospels have become popular, especially for those, to your point, who have a ideal of economic, advancement, and they say, you know what? I believe it's nothing wrong with making money. God wants you to make money so you can help the others. But we talk about sometimes something becomes so toxicity of it, And so, I look at it like it's become a toxic thing that has turned people off. Now they put their fingers to their nose because like I don't want to smell that toxicity of the prosperity of God, and it's been bastardized, curated into something not so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree or disagree?
I agree wholeheartedly, and I say it's too much of it. Now let me just say this: I don't believe anything is wrong with the blessings of the Lord. For the blessings of the Lord maketh rich and addeth no sorrow. I'm not sorry about how God has favored me.
Yeah.
I'm not sorry about the doors He's opened. I'm not sorry for the houses that I live in that I didn't pay for.
Yeah.
Or the land that I'm with that He has gone before me. So we're not saying none of that.
Yeah.
But when that is the focus and you have lost the spirit of like liberation, that when you are focused more on the bottom line of how much is coming in and not how much you're giving out, then that's why you get an imbalance, and that's where the toxicity, you talk about it. And so we try to make sure that our ministry focuses on outreach, and that no matter how the God blesses. And Bishop Derek McCray, I don't know if you all know him out of the Experience Christian Center. Shout out to Bishop McCray. He teaches us.
He was supposed to be on this podcast, by the way, but
really?
we ain't gonna get. I ain't gonna get onto you, Bishop.
Today's a busy day. It's Good Friday.
It's Good Friday. By the time people hear it, it's after Easter. But yes, it's a Good Friday.
Yes, I will make sure. I will make sure he shows up.
And actually, you know what? He's actually he just celebrated an anniversary.
Yes.
So shout out to him as well.
Yes.
I'm just teasing.
Him and Lady T.
Yeah.
So Bishop teaches us, even with his setup, that his biggest line item or budget is outreach.
Yeah.
And so no matter how much we take in, we're putting that much out.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where the balance has to be, that if you are all about cars and clothes, and again, we're not with that, but you're not helping us on April the 19th to be in Tallahassee to stand up against Governor Ron DeSantis.
We're going to get to that.
And these maps.
We're going to get to that.
That I got issues.
Yeah. We're going to get to that.
I got issues with you. If you are not, fighting the good fight and ensuring that people have what they need. And I'm not saying that we all have to do everything.
Right.
But everyone can do something.
Yeah.
And no one should do nothing.
Right.
And I just feel like it's a bunch of nothing going on.
Right.
When so much could be happening.
Right. So here's the thing, right? So I do, to that point, it's a missed idea or missed opportunity of pushing of ideas, an ideal, right? The internet has really created an amazing environment for people to become more aware. But it's almost like as we become more aware in the world, we become so desensitized to everything.
Absolutely.
And so in that awareness, a lot more Black people are becoming aware of white supremacy and how it really ties into the very framework of the American society. And with the Black church really being raised from the ashes of white supremacy, how do you modernize something that was born of hate and pain?
Yeah. Speak a little more on that. More, you would say modernize.
Because there are those who may look at it like, I don't want to be a part of something that was bred from slavery. I don't want to be a part of something that was like Christianity. Christianity was imparted on us because they wanted to keep us, in line.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? Like, so how do you modernize the ideals of the Black church, from people who look at things from the view of tackling white supremacy?
Yeah. I think you have to go beyond what you understand the church to be. And so, like, you have to go to the establishment of the church, Peter.
Yeah.
Like, you got to go back, and the church was, and the tenets of the church, as we know them, were long here before, quote unquote, white supremacy was here. Yeah. And I understand the argument that the Black church in some way some of our ideals and things were birthed
Right.
through it. But the concept of who the church really is goes beyond that.
Yeah.
So I don't want us to get stuck on that nuance, that we make that the end all be all of everything.
Right.
And so I think if we, again, go back to our roots as we talk about who the church is, what the church was meant to be. When you started off, you talked about, I think something along the lines of the church coming out of the four walls or something like that. I thought you were referencing in the rap. The church was in houses, right?
Yeah.
When we say the old church, the New Testament church, as you understand the biblical church, we weren't in buildings. It was a community.
Yeah. It wasn't these brick and mortar things.
Yes.
Churches where you're at.
Churches were where you were at.
Yeah.
They met you. That's why Jesus traveled so much.
Right.
He met you at the point of your need. And so I want us to refocus our attention. And I mean, not ignoring certain things, but let's not get bogged down in that, because that's not all of who we are. Right.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned the lyrics, or we talked about, I opened with Tupac, and when I said like it was my idea, and the same thing with Coltrane, it was my idea that recognizing what prayer is, and recognizing how it was a modern idea of how we see prayer, and I always thought to myself, it'd be fascinating. It should be, if church would take on. And I understand it's hard because sometimes the lyrics can be a little bit colorful, right? Risque, right? But why is it that the church doesn't embrace, the tenets of, let's say, musical expression that is not so much Christian, right? But it has, you know what I'm saying? Because that song wasn't a Christian song, but is literally, it had the fabric of Christianity in it, because he was talking to God. He's talking about, I'm going to go to hell because of the things I've done in my life. And it says in that particular song, I'm banging for God to let me into heaven's door. You know what I mean? So like, I say all that to say, because I know I'm very esoteric right now, but I'm saying that it's the idea of like, maybe the church has to adjust in how they see faith.
Absolutely. My father says this, methods are many, principles are few. Methods always change, principles never do.
Right.
So he teaches us that as long as you keep the principle of the thing and the foundation,
right,
the methods can always change.
Right.
And where the black church is now, we're still holding on to old methods.
Right.
Because we think these methods are principles. In actuality, they are not principles.
Right.
As an addendum to that, the church is not moving into a more modern age because the church is not led by modern individuals.
Let's talk about that.
The church as a whole is in a backlog of leadership. There are people who should be off the scene, retired, still trying to lead the church.
Right.
And so that's why you have what would you say, an 8-track generation or 8-track type of leadership in a CD generation?
We're not CD anymore.
Well, what are we? MP3?
Yeah, we're streaming.
Streaming.
Yes.
Look at me.
Yeah,
I'm even behind.
Yeah. So so you might there might be more apropos is you have a cassette generation trying to talk to a streaming generation.
Just not talk to, trying to lead.
Right.
And telling the streaming generation, no, you got a few more years.
Right.
You just sit back.
Right.
And so much is being lost.
Right.
Because people who, for whatever reason, never felt that they had their chance, just wants to.
So here's the funny thing about that. Just keeping along with that analogy, right? The cassette players really, in order to get broadcast music, you had to get a boom box, or a little cassette player. So in order to really get something, you had to put it into something. in order to receive the benefit out of it, right? That's how we received information. That's how we received whatever, right? Whether it was music or whatever information. But in streaming generation, I don't need to be inside of something in order to receive it, right? So you have a streaming generation who says information should not be through, the brick and mortar of church. It should be through whenever and however and how and why, wherever and however I get the information.
Absolutely.
So there's a disconnect because they don't see the world, in the same way. And they don't see faith, because faith is not whereas a cassette generation, faith has to be within a specific space in order to derive the benefit from it.
So that I can control. It's all about control in some respect.
Whereas the streaming's like, faith can be wherever I want to place it.
Wherever I want to place it.
So we talked about Peter, and sometimes people confuse where they say Peter, he's the rock. Although Peter means rock, they say Peter's the rock of the church. But in reality, what Jesus said when Peter said Christ Jesus, is the son of the Lord. And
following you.
And he says, and that's where Christ says, and this is where I lay the church. It's on the faith, not on Peter.
Correct. Upon this rock.
I
build my church.
On
the faith.
Right, on the faith. So faith can be anywhere. It could be on the street. It could be, that means it should be streaming.
It says now faith.
Right.
Is the substance of things hoped for.
And the evidence of things not seen.
Now faith.
Yeah.
If you can believe it now.
Right.
Wherever you are. Yeah. It can manifest.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be in the church.
Right.
It can be in the club.
It could be. It should be. So I you know what I said one time? I told the pastor that I said, man, one Easter Sunday, it was packed. So I was like, oh, this is great. Black people looking good. Everybody coming out. I said, what y'all should do one day? One Easter? Y'all should go down to the, what's that park right down here in downtown, in the middle, next to...
don't get me the...
next to the Citrus Bowl.
Yes, they just renovated.
Yeah. Doom, Lake Lana Doom.
Thank you.
Yeah, and before it was renovated, we remember what Lake Lana Doom used to look like before it was renovated.
They would let us go down there as kids.
Right, because it had a lot of people on Lake Lana Doom that on a Sunday, that were just hanging out, drinking, smoking, doing drugs on a Sunday morning, sometimes tricking on a Sunday. And I said, man, I told this pastor, I said, you should one Sunday really do service over there. Say, hey, we're not going to be in the church on this Easter Sunday. We're not going to tell that, but we're just going to one day just kind of, I'm going to get on a box, stand up and start preaching at Lake Lana Doom. And I said, that would be a fascinating thing, because you're preaching to the congregants who were never going to make it to Easter service.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, that's an idea. When black people say, yeah, it's an idea. That's not, but I was like, that's really, just one, I said, you didn't have to make it a tradition. I said, just one, it didn't even have to be Easter. I said, but one Sunday, just try that.
Yeah.
They don't want to do that. I said that 10 years ago. It goes to the point of, I was trying to push them out of their comfort zone of how they deliver faith and the message. Because it's great for us to all get into, wear our Sunday best. It's great for us to go to the church and wear our Sunday best.
Correct.
But sometimes people they're not even going to make it to the church. So you have to meet them where they're at.
He says, go out, Mark 16:15, go out into all the world.
Right.
All the world.
Right.
Just not the world of the church, but all the worlds.
Right.
Whatever worlds you can find yourself, go into all the world and preach the gospel.
It was Paul who went to everywhere in order to spread it. Paul didn't say, hey, meet me over here in order for me, for y'all to get this word. Paul said, I will be in the prison.
He was in the prison. Yeah. A lot of his letters were written in prison, in jail.
In jail. But Paul also was ministering to those in the jail. And so that's where I was trying to tell this particular person, you should have a Paul-like service one day. Go to the spaces that don't smell so good, don't look so good, and minister.
And that's what I said, when the church has forgotten who they are.
Yeah.
That is why we are somewhat in the predicament we're in, because we have forgotten our mandate, our mission, our purpose.
Yeah. So let's talk about white supremacy and how it's really it's hurt the church, because how sometimes people end up creating ideals on white supremacy unknowingly, or anti-blackness rather.
Okay.
Right. And specifically, you mentioned Ron DeSantis and these laws, and even going down the muck and mire of it, how the churches are often afraid to really, take on stances that mean a lot to black people, because they're afraid of losing either, money, funding, or their status. Right. But it's weird, because I never see churches that lose their status because somebody decided to make a political statement.
Brother, I don't know where they get it from. I don't know what you're losing.
Right.
But you're right.
Yeah. I don't see it. People say, well, we can't be too political because we lose our status. I'm like, can you show me the church that lost its status because they show it to me. Show it to me that happens, and I can show you a million that are literally talking about vote for this person because he's aligned with God.
Exactly.
Right.
It's a cop out.
Right.
It's a hide behind. It's sad.
Right.
It's very, very sad the way the church has just dropped the ball on the opportunities that have been afforded to it to arise and to be a shining light and beacon of hope.
Right.
Now that's, clash. That's something that we always say.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know where they get it from. But I pray that this last go round of the things that we've seen, like you said, we've seen white supremacy through the media, having able to access it. We've seen it at such a higher rate, that the injustice that people are seeing, I pray that people are getting more emboldened to speak up.
So you even have churches who are afraid to say white supremacy. Yeah. They're afraid to say it on Sunday.
It's a trick of the enemy. It really is a trick of the enemy.
Yeah.
To make you feel like you can't call. And that's what he's called us
to do,
to call out.
Yeah.
To speak up. And I just don't know what the hindrances are, other than people just don't want to be bothered.
Well, you know what's going to happen? Church will die on the vine, because black people want to see themselves. If I'm a black liberator and I see white supremacy around me, and I go to a place that doesn't want to acknowledge it, doesn't want to get into it, then I don't see myself in that church, and therefore I don't see myself in that faith. And it's the missed thought process, the missed opportunity for a lot of pastors, a lot of bishops, a lot of preachers who don't want to attack it head on. Because I'm going to tell you, for those that, we talked the 50s and 60s, they were not afraid to say this was racist. We have to attack racism. Imagine if they would have said, we can't talk about race. And I know laws were put in the 1980s that restricted political speech. It was done again to make people fearful of getting too political. But again, nobody's taking away a status because somebody else decided to speak truth to power. And so I see a church that's afraid to talk about white supremacy, then I see a church who's afraid to talk about truth. And if I see a church who's afraid to talk about truth, then what you're doing is you're idealizing lies, and misinformation. And nobody wants to be part of a church that only idealizes lies and misinformation.
It's hard to call out something that you are.
Ooh.
And so oftentimes we're talking about the white supremacy, but what about the oppression, the suppression, the depression that's going on in the church?
Yeah.
By our own people.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of hypocritical.
But they're profiteers of white supremacy.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah.
It's kind of hypocritical at times for you to be calling out things, and you are that.
Right.
In the black context.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned you're with an organization, Equal Ground?
Yes, Equal Ground. A black-led, black-focused civil rights voting rights organization.
Yeah.
Based out of Orlando, Florida, founded in 2019 by Miss Jasmine Burney Clark,
Yeah.
a Bethune-Cookman University grad. I know I'm looking at FAMU degrees here.
But it's okay. It's HBCU love. You know what I'm saying?
HBCU love.
We don't.
She's also a graduate of FAMU.
Yeah, the only time we don't rock is when it's classic.
It's the classic.
But then it's family thing, so we don't let other people
Hey, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane. Listen, it's like that Will Smith, Chris Rock. Hey, we can talk about it, but y'all need to shut your mouth.
Please.
You know what I'm saying? This ain't got nothing to do with y'all. I know it was done in front of y'all. This ain't got nothing to do with y'all.
So move on,
right?
And the organization focuses primarily on voting rights, but handles a myriad of other issues, educational issues, civil rights issues. So we're just in it all, based in Orlando.
So you mentioned April 19th. And,
yes.
What are you guys talking? I know about the congressional maps. I'm well aware of how Ron DeSantis, a noted white supremacist, is trying to push congressional maps. In fact, I keep that thought because what I want to talk about I want to talk about Ron DeSantis for a moment.
Go ahead.
Because I don't like him. I call him DeSatan.
DeSatan.
Yeah, and
wow.
Because Ron DeSantis is actually one of those people to where, he's fascinating to me, for a lot of reasons.
Okay.
The devil oftentimes is so intelligent, crafty, that he's doing something with his left hand, showing you life is good over here. Don't worry about it, right? But what he's doing with his right hand is going around your back and stabbing you. But you're focused on the left hand. Mm-hmm. So DeSantis, his left hand, what he does is he'll do appointments of black judges. He'll do appointments of black people in certain executive commissions. He even do a press conference where he'll have a prominent black coach get in front of the microphone and propagate, right-wing talking points, about black fathers and its noted connection to, jail and prison incarceration, when that's actually been debunked 10 times over, right? So he'll do these things. And the thing about the devil shields his wickedness in good works, right? In seemingly good works.
Seemingly.
Right? He shields it like this. How can this be so bad if it helps other people? Right? How can it be bad? But we don't. So we look at something through the prism of if it helps people, then it must be good. But we don't understand that sometimes it's not the help that is given in the initial focus, but it's the purpose, right? What is the purpose? What are we doing? So DeSantis, I call him DeSatan because a lot of times I'm not looking at, the left hand, what he always wants to do. He does these big headlines, and I see black people all the time. I've seen it throughout this week, especially this week. I saw a number of black people like, yeah, I'm going to vote for DeSantis. Oh, yeah, they said it.
Jesus.
Yeah, I'm going to vote for DeSantis. I rock with him. I like him. I've actually had a number of different black people say, I don't think he's a white supremacist. They literally have told me that because he's appointed black people. And then so my thing is, yes, he appoints black people. But at the same time, it's this man who's trying to take away black voting rights. But he's appointed black people. But it's the same man who's trying to restrict black education in schools. But he's appointed black people. But this is the same man who's openly trying to appeal a federal ruling that said Florida's laws that he stamped with his own, signature. They said, Florida is so racist that you need we're going to do a 10-year moratorium on y'all doing any more voting laws. That's how racist y'all are. And DeSantis is like, wait. I don't believe in that. We're going to appeal that. But you know what? He's appointed black people and he actually cares about black fathers. These are the things that frustrate me because Black people don't stay on message too much. We don't stay on code. We get so caught up in the left hand so much that we don't see the right hand. And it bothers me. It makes me sick. It makes me sick.
Yeah.
And I get to the point where I get sick and I get tired. Because I'm like, you know what? God bless sometimes. Because I'm like, I'm tired. You so far gone that if you are so far gone by an appointment that you can't see white supremacy, that I can't help you. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. You know, the thing about it is, a lot of times I heard black people say, I'm not going to get behind the don't say gay bill, which it wasn't even called that, but let's just whatever. I said, that's really fascinating to me. I said, you know what's really in that bill though? No. I just don't want my kids getting taught certain things. I said, well, I don't know if you've ever had kids in school, but they can't even get through regular curriculum. So I don't know what's being taught on that. But let's just keep it a buck, right? So but I said, you know what's really in the bill? What's really challenging? The thing that people that haven't talked about is that it's prohibiting the teaching of black education. Mm-hmm. That's really in the bill. Mm-hmm. You know, it's the right hand that you should be focusing on, not the left hand that I'm challenging Disney and da-da-da-da. I don't care about all that. Yeah, that means nothing to me. It's the right hand that's telling you that black education, we're going to prohibit what can be taught. But you know what? He appoints black people. So I went off on a tangent there, but I want you to, I just had to lay it out a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize. Don't apologize. Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. And you talk about DeSantis and the devil. The devil comes to do three things.
Kill, steal, and destroy.
Kill, steal, and destroy. That's all the devil comes to do. So even if it's clothed in life, it's coming to kill, steal, and destroy. Yeah. And so you have to keep the main thing the main thing. And when people show you who they are,
believe them.
Believe them. I don't know why we have a tendency to, and I know from people of faith, it's, giving people a chance and love and all of that gracious stuff. But when people show you who they are, initially, take note of that.
Right.
And stop falling into the same pit holes that we keep falling ourselves into based on optics. And so, Governor DeSantis is one of the most oppressive leaders when it comes to stripping individuals, black people, of voting rights. Particularly. I heard it said that he will probably pull off single-handedly one of the most suppressive tenures we've ever seen in the nation.
Yeah.
Of single-handedly, basically removing the black vote in Florida.
Literally.
And so,
but he appoints black people though.
But and then to that question, and what are these black people doing for you?
Right.
We've tried to meet with the Attorney General, not Attorney General, Secretary General. No. What is
Surgeon General?
Surgeon General. Thank you.
Right.
Surgeon General. Still haven't been able to meet with him.
Right.
But
there's this statement that was on my social media where somebody said, black politicians, because I said the same thing. He's trying to strip black representation, and they often confuse or conflate the idea of black representation, and sometimes these black politicians get in office, which is true, and they don't do anything, and that is a different conversation. But you know why it's a different conversation? Because white politicians do the same damn thing, but you don't see white people being like, "I'm not going to vote for white people."
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I do want to talk about the black politicians who are not doing nothing. That's another day or time. But
no, we can talk about that. This is a podcast.
I do want to talk about that. They're doing nothing.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I just feel I feel before we get off DeSantis.
Yeah,
he is. I want the people to wake up, to see what he's doing, and to fight back. Yeah. So April 19th.
Yeah.
We'll be going to Tallahassee. For those who do not know, probably when this is released, this is over. So we'll probably be in litigation.
Yeah.
So the governor has done something unprecedented. He has presented now his third drawing of his own map. This is what we're saying, people. Hear me clearly. DeSantis is drawing his own maps.
They don't say it a third time.
DeSantis is drawing his own. He is determining who will vote where.
Right.
And what representation that area will have.
Right. They don't hear you. But you know what? He appoints black people, so why are you so upset?
Oh God. I we went through the census. The census is very important because it gives you the population, and when the population changes, these maps have to be drawn.
Right.
The maps are currently being drawn, which will determine black representation.
Right.
Currently, we only have 4 black representatives on the congressional level. Let me see if I can remember their names. Al Hastings' seat, the new lady, I'm forgetting her name. Please forgive me.
It's all right, but we have 4 congressional level, and then now he wants to
remove 2. Val Demings, District 10, and Al Lawson, District 5.
Yeah.
Which will remove, and black representation is tied to so much, right? Because those are almost guaranteed votes on some black issues.
Right.
Not only that, in your district, the things that you see supportive of black initiatives, those things are going to be erased.
Right.
And so we're going up on the 19th. That is the first day of special session. Because he vetoed those bills, we have to go into special session. And the legislature, the Republican-led legislature, has already said that they are not going to draw any more maps. They're going to receive his maps and vote on them.
Well, they've tried a couple times to be like, that map's a little much, DeSantis. And now they're just like, we're not just, they've kowtowed to him, and they're like, it is what it is.
Yeah, they have just said, we're not going to do it. And so because of that, it's probably going to have to be handled by the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court did not acknowledge the map because he tried to circumvent the whole process and send it straight to the Supreme Court. Yeah. And the Supreme Court said, nah, buddy, you're not going to do that. Right. Now, we don't know why the Supreme Court did it. Was it because they didn't like the maps, or they didn't like the way the process went? Yeah. But we do have to keep in mind that he did appoint some of these people on the Supreme Court. Yeah. So these are his people. But hopefully the Supreme Court prayerfully will do what is right and say, we can't have maps drawn by the governor.
Right.
Who's running for president.
Right. They don't, it's like, it's almost, you know what it is? It's like you're operating in a world. Has anybody else seen the crazy?
Anybody seen it? Like, makes you feel crazy at times. Yeah. Because you don't think that so many people are not seeing this.
Right. You're like, do y'all understand? He's drawing a map so when he runs for president, it's going to guarantee his seat. Do you not see? This is nefarious. This is what the devil's doing. This
is what kill, steal, and destroy.
The right hand. This is what the right hand's doing.
And so,
but you know what? He appoints black people. So, what are you complaining about, Camara?
So shout out to Equal Ground and Jasmine Bernie Clark, who are single-handedly, now I'm not saying this because she's my longtime college friend and boss, but single-handedly, Equal Ground and her leadership has devised a plan, a 3-week plan. So we're just not going up there yelling, hollering, and screaming. We have been on this for the last 3 weeks since the announcement, sending out text messages, calling individuals, sending letters to legislators. Right. We have a bus going up on that Tuesday of community members. Shout out to everyone who is, putting their hand to the wheel to help this. And so we need everyone involved. Yeah. We need everyone involved. And so even after you hear this, we'll probably be sending out information around the update. And so we invite you to continue to kind of watch this and engage it because it's not over. Yeah. It's not over.
Yeah. Yeah. That's dope. So let's go into the subject you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. So
black politicians not being worth a damn.
That is...
That's not what you said, but that's my word.
That is part of the problem.
Yeah.
And I know that there are ethical issues like legalities that some people cannot say certain things or show up in certain places, but that doesn't stop you from writing a letter.
Yeah.
That doesn't stop you from making your voice heard. And right now we have a lot of African-American politicians who are running for other seats but who I feel are not doing what they should be doing in the seat that you do have. But yet you want us to trust us with the larger seat. And it really becomes disheartening as a grassroots organization to really be fighting the fights that legislators should be leading.
You know, it's keeping that without naming names. It's that they want buy-in for a bigger, promotion. But, when I'm looking at the record and I'm like, what have you done with the thing I've given you? We've given you the placement of your position where you're at. And when I'm, you're looking funny in the light when I'm looking at the record. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm turning pages. I haven't seen why I should do buy-in to why you deserve a promotion.
Yeah.
And it's disheartening because these are going to be the same people that are going to want grassroots to push them into that thing. But then when grassroots says, okay, well, why? Outside of we don't like the other candidate, but why?
And then we're deemed haters.
Yeah.
We're trying to be blockers.
Right.
Well, we're just trying to hold people accountable. And I think that's where, now I do want to put this in there. There are legislators who are working, and if I could just call one out, like Angie Nixon out of Jacksonville. Behind us 100%, but she comes from a organizing background. But she's been one who has been on the front. There are several others who have been on the front. I don't know if you know our own Camilla Brown has just been made chair of the Black Caucus. So some people are on the ground doing the work. But I'm just talking about from a whole. Yeah. Like, where is the Black agenda?
Right.
Like, how are we moving people, not just while we're in office, but like, what is the next steps for us to move past where we are currently? What is the goal? What is the future? How are we galvanizing the Black community to be able to make a change? And I just feel like there is a lack of leadership, a lack of foresight, a lack of strategic planning. And it's a lot of, reactiveness and not proactiveness.
That because nobody's, to your point, no agenda, no plan.
Yeah.
No vision. No ideas.
And without a vision, the people
are lost.
Perish.
Are
lost. Yeah. Hey, same thing.
Yeah.
So you're going nowhere. That's
basically,
basically what it is.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking for the day when we as a community, but someone said something to me, and I'm going to do a little research on it. So if I'm wrong, I apologize. But they said, that's nothing. That's nothing new. Martin Luther King was not an elected official. Right. And those who were with him were not elected officials. Where were the elected officials of the civil rights age?
Yeah, well,
so like the Black elected officials.
Yeah. So it's I'm not going to name it because he's actually an Alpha brother, and he's based out of New York. But he was not a fan of Martin Luther King, and and he often moved, but he was also he believed in Black liberation, but in a different way than MLK. MLK was not a popular figure.
Yeah,
and so it's interesting because then it brings a conversation of how do you merge advocacy within the church? Because sometimes it can look like putting it back into the Black church as the center of this conversation. How do we marry those two sometimes? Like, what are some of the initiatives we can do to get the Black church, to get people to see the Black church as advocacy and give the Black church to be an advocacy?
Yeah. Like I tell pastors always, first of all, you have to know your community, right? You have to have a heart for the community. Yeah. And a lot of times we want the community to come to us, and we have to go out to the community, which means we have to call our elected officials up. Hey, I'm coming in for a meeting. Our church wants to be an advocate. You have the data. Yeah. Where are the needs of the city?
Yeah.
You don't have to do this alone for those who want to get civically engaged. There are people within City Hall who have the data, who know the layout of the land, and can show you, okay, you want to focus on food, but food maybe not, it's mental illness. Or maybe it's not mental illness. Maybe it's gun violence.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that you are developing plans that are meeting the needs of the community and just not doing something for the cameras.
Gotcha.
That's one way to merge. It's to, first of all, recognize what are the needs and then equip the congregation to be able to meet the needs. That means bringing in experts and officials to teach the congregation, how do we deal with mental illness? How do we deal with gun violence? How do we deal with poverty and all these other things that the communities are faced with? And then it's raising your voice. It's showing up. It's nothing like a city council meeting, and instead of going to Bible study one night, everyone head down to the city council meeting.
Yeah.
That's going to be our Bible study. We're going to learn what's going on.
That's I like that.
We're gonna. And can you imagine?
Yeah.
Those city council people, if a pastor brought his Bible study,
to a council meeting, community. I love that. I'm just thinking about the vision. I'm like, oh, that's great.
Yeah. Do you know what that can say, what that can do?
Yeah.
And so the church has to realize it has the power. It just has to utilize its power.
You know what I want to talk about?
Yeah.
I forgot to talk about this. So it kind of goes off subject what we were talking about.
Okay.
Spirituality.
Yeah.
And how Black people say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. You've heard that?
Yeah.
That term. And how do you reconcile that within the Black church?
When I hear it, I hear somebody's just hurt. Normally I can just almost, if I talk to them, they've been hurt.
What if they're not hurt? What if they just say like, I just don't agree with the principles of Orthodox Christendom?
I have no problem with that because a lot of the things that people say are God are not. Mm-hmm. And so my thing is find God however you can find him.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
I like
because at the end of the day, the Bible says save yourself from this untoward generation. At the end of the day, it's not about how many times you went into the physical church, but it's your relationship with the Father.
Yeah.
And so however you need to find God, find him.
How does somebody say I haven't heard God, I haven't heard God's voice in years?
You haven't heard God's voice in years. I want you to get quieter.
You got to listen to the sheet music. You got to listen to the sheet music.
I want you to get quieter.
Yeah.
Because he tells us that he will never leave us.
I will never leave you. I will never forsake you.
Nor forsake you. But lo, I'm with you always.
Yeah.
Even until the end of the world. So if you say you haven't heard, just get a little quieter.
Right. Pivoting back to John Coltrane.
Full circle.
He heard God in the quiet moments of his pain, and the struggle. And sometimes we talk about, I don't hear God. I don't, God, but it's like, well, you probably don't hear him because you've never sat down and listened and heard the words from the music of the world. The words are there. You're not focusing. You're not sitting down in your apartment, closing your eyes and trying to hear what's happening.
Because you want to talk.
You want to talk.
You want to talk.
Or you need words. Because you are so used to communication of the Lord coming in one way.
Yeah.
And we know what I always tell people, is that God speaks to you in a multitude of ways. I try to find God communication in the smallest little things. Mm-hmm. Not to say that I even find it in a preacher. It might be the cashier at a Wawa might say something, and it's like, dang, I was kind of just thinking about that, And they're not, but just, they said a line like, you gotta be careful when you do, and it's like, oh, I had just had this thought about something else unrelated, but it really ties it in. Mm-hmm. But I said that was God talking to me, and it was inspiring me, and I was listening because I wasn't out there trying to look for God in the Wawa, but I was open to the idea of his presence.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And you have to be open to the idea of his presence. And then if you open, he will find you.
He will find you. And this is the beautiful part. When he finds you, it says, when the Spirit of truth is come, he will lead and guide you into all truth.
Right.
So I don't have to try to make you understand this.
Right.
When he gets a hold of you,
yeah,
he's going to reveal it in such a way that I could never explain it to you.
Yeah.
And once you got it like that,
yeah,
you got it.
Yeah. It's same like the prodigal son, where, the prodigal son returns and that story. But the best part about that is he didn't wait for him to get to the doorstep. He didn't need him to get all the way. He was on a long property. He's like, once he made that decision to walk onto the property of God, walk onto the property of faith, God leapt up from his seat on the porch and ran towards him.
To him.
That's the thing. God will run towards you.
He'll meet you at the point of your need.
Yeah. Yeah.
He will literally meet you at the point of your need.
Yeah.
But you have to be vulnerable to him.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it says, cast your cares upon him.
Yeah.
Because he cares for you.
What about those who are atheists
and
say, you know what? I just believe in doing good works. Because, religion doesn't exist.
He teaches us that he has sheep that are not of this fold. And so I take that to say Jesus talks about sheep that are not of this particular fold. And so it tells us that there are individuals who the church may never understand, or they may never take on the churchhood, but they are still the sheep of God.
Yeah.
And so I let God be God in those areas and allow people to find God the best way they can.
Yeah. You know what I say? Well, you don't, because I haven't said it yet, but I will say it. Those who are atheists actually do have a belief. And all faith is just a belief system. It's just your belief is non-belief. At the end of the day, you're choosing a belief system. And so, my thing is, I always say it costs you nothing to have faith. It costs you everything to not have it. And so I don't know what God is, in reality, because I've never seen the physical form.
He's a spirit.
Right? But, I always say to myself that by the time I know what God is, it's going to be too late because I'm going to be on the other side, right? But I'd rather get to the other side with understanding of his presence than, and not have a definitive, structure in my mind of what he is or isn't, right? Then say he doesn't exist, and then I get to the other side, I'm like, well, I do exist, but you didn't believe. And so I don't exist to you because you choose not to believe. So I always say you don't have to believe in a specific ideal of God as long as you know that God exists.
Yeah.
And guess what? If you even believe that God, or you believe, I'll even go even better. And you may push back on this one against me. I would say you can even believe just in a creator, right? Because guess what? The moment you open your door to think there's something bigger than you in this universe, then God's like, okay. Now he's kind of he or she opening the door to think there's something bigger. I'm going to get off my porch now, and I'm going to run towards you to show that not only there's something bigger, but I am the thing, that you've been searching for.
Yeah, mustard seed faith. Just a little bit of faith.
Faith of a mustard seed.
Just a little bit of faith.
Right. Yeah.
And the Bible talks about that he gives each man a measure of faith.
Yeah.
And so that's why I just let God be God in those areas.
Yeah.
Because I could never understand it.
Yeah.
I could never, work it out. Let God be God in those areas. And I truly do believe, my faith believes that everyone that's supposed to be touched by him, he goes to them and reveals himself in the way that they can understand. But you have to do this. A friend of mine said in theology school, God is not a rapist. He does not force himself upon
onto
you.
you. Yeah. That was very
Graphic.
That was very graphic. I was like, oh my God. Oh.
Yeah. God's not going to force himself on you. Yeah. God's not going to, that's what he says, choose ye this day. Mm-hmm. So the moment that he reveals himself to you, that is the moment for you either to receive or not to receive. Yeah. And that's your prerogative. Yeah. That's your choice. You don't have to choose God.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Listen, it's Good Friday. By the time people...
But you should. Let me put that in there.
Oh, yeah,
as a preacher. Yeah. But you should choose God.
Right. Yeah, I got you. So listen, I'm going to let your final thoughts on God in the modern space, or the church in the modern space, or whatever subject we talked about, Black liberation. I'm going to let you give your final thoughts on this. It's a couple days after Easter by the time they hear it. But a lasting message that you think people need to hear that maybe we didn't even talk about. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity to dialogue with you. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm made better by some of the points that were lifted up. Yeah. Thank you for the introduction to John Coltrane. I've heard Coltrane before, but I don't think I've probably heard the music, just didn't know I was listening to the music.
Possibly.
But I'm going to listen to music. Now, should I listen to this on vinyl?
Well, listen. I'm one of those what do you call it? I think vinyl always gives a uniqueness. Mm-hmm. But CD works.
The CD works?
Yeah.
It's like good food, the palate. It's just a little different taste.
Yeah. But if we don't have access to a vinyl.
Yeah, my best friend.
Yeah.
I go get his. Or go to the store and go have a reason to go shopping.
Yeah. You know what? I wish you would have told me, because I do have it on vinyl.
Really?
But, I would want it back. I'm not opposed to charging charge back. Hey, give me my record, Pastor.
This will help me become more cultured. My wife will be like, what?
Yeah.
So thank you for introducing that to the listeners. Really appreciate it. Hopefully you find value in something that was lifted up. But in my closing remarks, I really want to encourage you to take ownership of your life.
Yeah.
Don't allow anything to control you control you in such a way that you are just operating just to be operating. I want you to walk purposefully in your life and take accountability for the part that you play in the world.
Yeah.
And everyone, again, can't do everything. And God hasn't called everyone to do everything, but God has uniquely placed something in you to make this world and the world around you a better place. And I want you to lean into that.
Yeah.
And once you lean into that, I really do feel like life will be made better for you, even through struggle, disappointment. If you lean into that, I believe you'll have everything that you need. I know that I don't know you, but I'm praying for you. Mm-hmm. And I pray that God continues to bless and prosper you.
Yes. Amen. So I like to end every pod on a love letter to Black culture.
Okay.
So, dear Black culture, we just took a deep analysis of where Black church is, or where the Black church is, or where it's been, or where it's going. And what are our expectations? How does the church reach those in the flock who have become less Christian and more spiritual? Heck, how does the church address those who have walked away from religion altogether? Now, I don't know if we answered or addressed those questions today, or, we've given it to what people's satisfaction. But I do think we've raised some interesting topics of what is God's placement in a world that continues to not recognize his presence. It's my opinion that the Black church failed to recognize the potential of articulating Jesus, not as some passive saint who has come from above, but in reality, a Black liberator who took against the state injustices against the poor, the downtrodden, and the overlooked. Hair of wool, feet of clay. He was a Black man. Removing the aesthetic of the benevolent, omnipresent leader, and focusing on how his and focusing on how his life's work resembles those that are fighting injustice every day. Yes, Jesus, a black man, would have definitely been a part of the Black Lives Movement. It's important for the black church to recognize that the church in its traditional sense may never revert back to the orthodoxy of the 50s and 60s. But the same way the churches back then were a central part in promotion of black civil liberation, the church today has to recognize that while the jungle landscape may have changed, there are still predators out there who are trying to destroy the black community via anti-black legislation and talking points. They must speak to individuals who often don't see church in the muck and mire of the wilderness. If it is to survive, speaking of the black church, it must be willing to have church in the wild or at Lake Nanadoon. So with that being said, we're going to ride out with this song, and I hope you all appreciate it. And thank you for listening to Uncultured Bias podcast.